¿Qué tal? Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, how are you? Perhaps I could make a brief introduction and take stock of these few days in the General Assembly of the United Nations, and then perhaps, of course, I would be pleased to answer your questions. As you know, the Government of Spain has been participating since last Monday in the Climate Action Summit and also in the General Assembly. And what we are addressing are central axes of our action in the government, the topics we're addressing. And this is the time and place to generate willingness, commitment, global and political commitment in the United Nations. In these last few days, Spain has been showing its commitment, leadership and ambition to contribute to this global effort, which will allow us to urgently address the challenges we have ahead of us. The main landmarks these last few days have been, above all, the participation of the Spanish government in the speech to the General Assembly of the United Nations. Yesterday I made this speech, as you know. It was a chance to talk about the vision my government has and our commitments for action. And what has convened us here in this General Assembly meeting. And I was also able to announce that yesterday there was a symbolic closing of the democratic circle. Spain was unable to participate in the creation of the United Nations almost 75 years ago because of the Franco dictatorship. And yesterday the High Court, the Supreme Court in Spain, authorized the exhumation of Franco's remains. As I said yesterday to the General Assembly, this is a victory for Spanish democracy. Secondly, the Climate Action Summit. This is the main challenge facing us. How to address the climate emergency effectively. The Secretary-General of the United Nations convened us on Monday to the Climate Action Summit and asked all participants to increase our levels of ambition. And this is what Spain has done. During the government's participation in the summit, we were able to announce our commitments. The commitments we've been able to mobilize in the coalition we've been co-leading with Peru on political and social aspects of climate action, not only with regard to ecological transition, but also to ensure that this is a just transition. So we announced Spain's commitment to contribute 150 million euros over the next 4 years to the Green Climate Fund. We also committed to ratifying the Kigali Amendment and the Montreal Protocol, and we will give 2 million euros to the Adaptation Fund to the Climate Convention. Along the same lines of boosting political movement towards climate change, we were invited to inaugurate one of the most prestigious events in New York in combating climate change. That is the New York Climate Week. We were able to, I think this is one of the most important moments and most exciting moments. We were able to meet young Spanish activists on climate change who were participating at the weekend in the Youth Climate Summit. I received a letter from the young people with commitments on climate change and signed on behalf of the Spanish government a commitment to our youth resulting from this summit. The third area was the Sustainable Development Goal Summit, the accomplishment of Agenda 2030. This is one of the great challenges to achieve a more just and equitable future, as I was able to say just a few moments ago. And this was at the heart of many of the activities that the Spanish government has been participating over the last few days in New York. We have just been participating, as I was saying, in the Sustainable Development Goals Summit. And this was an opportunity to repeat our commitment to Agenda 2030, which inspires and governs all our action in the government. And I also underscored the fact that Spain will contribute to 100 million euros over the next 5 years to the United Nations Joint Fund for the SDGs. And we were able to co-chair on Monday the panel 1 of the high-level meeting on universal health coverage, given the extraordinary work that our professionals are doing in health care. Along the same lines, the Spanish government was invited this morning to inaugurate, alongside Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, the event annually held by the Foundation, Goalkeepers. This is an event which mobilizes ambition and resources to achieve the SDGs, particularly those linked to health and education. As you know, during my speech there, I said that the Spanish government will, of course, make a contribution, which this will be 100 million euros over the next 3 years to the Global Fund for AIDS, Tuberculosis and Malaria. The third great challenge during this General Assembly of the United Nations is the dialogue between leaders with narratives, terrorist narratives. We participated last Monday in the leaders' dialogue to combat such narratives, terrorist narratives. In Spain, unfortunately, we know all about terrorism, and we were one of the countries with one of the greatest amount of experience in the world in combating this scourge. As members of the Christchurch initiative, imposted by New Zealand, we undersigned the protocol to establish an earlier warning system for extremist content on the internet and social media. With regard to bilateral meetings that I have been able to hold as President of the Government of Spain, such meetings have enabled us to meet various regional meetings, such as Secretary General of the United Nations, President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, President of Andorra, the Prime Ministers of New Zealand, President of Costa Rica and Peru, and Egypt and Iran. Finally, a word about the relationship between Spain and the United States. You will know that, as well as this, we have been promoting and participating in the whole of the multilateral agenda. We wanted to take the opportunity of being here to foster the relationship between Spain and the United States, and we have participated in the economic forum organised by the Chamber of Commerce in Spain and the United States, in cooperation with the El País group. We have met important business people, foreign investors, with interest in investments in Spain as well, so as to explain to them what the economic and political situation is in our country. And tomorrow I will lend my support to Spanish entrepreneurs who are promoting new initiatives in New York and projecting the image of our country here, such as the Little Spain initiative, led by José Andrés and the Adrian brothers. And I will also make a visit to a technological centre and meet those in charge there for various Spanish startups. So, by way of conclusion, I believe it's crucial for Spain to participate actively in these important events with great ambition. We can strengthen our image as a democratic European country with a great level of solidarity, whilst we also reiterate our commitments and our efforts towards multilateralism and to the global challenges which will shape life over the next few generations. So, without further ado, I am at your disposal to answer any questions you may wish to put to me. Thank you.
Perdón, la técnica.
No hay problema.
Presidente, le hemos visto con el presidente iraní estos...
Well, you met the Iranian president in recent days. What about this summit, and what about these weight that Spain has globally? What do you think? What would you say after almost a year here? With regard to Spain, I wanted to ask whether the arrival of Errejón is a good or bad piece of news for Centro Izquierda, that bloc. It may make it more easy to make a pact or a coalition, but it could have an effect on the vote. So I'd like to hear in your words whether you believe that you will sleep more soundly at night, given that Errejón is in the government with Pablo Iglesias. I would also like to say that over the last few days there have been various polls. Do you think that you're sure that these are going to improve your position? There are polls going in various directions. Why are you so sure that the elections will go in your direction, improve your position? Well, thank you, Carlos, for those questions. Perhaps we could start with Errejón, and I'll continue with the polls, and then the bilateral meetings I've been holding here. So on Íñigo Errejón. Well, we are seeing a change in the political space over recent times because of Podemos and those effects. I'm a leader of the Socialist Party, of course, and can take a certain amount of a step back, and with all respect, I don't want to get involved in domestic affairs of other political groups. I think the efforts we're undertaking are all aimed at trying to explain to people the importance of having a government, finally, in Spain, which is progressive, stable, coherent, and brings an end to these 5 years of instability and the provisional nature of the government, which Spanish politics has been going through. Regarding the polls, well, I think I answered your question. And on the polls now, in all elections, citizens are called to give a response. And I think that the question citizens will have to answer on the 10th of November is whether they want a stable, coherent government which provides a progressive response to many of the challenges that we have, our own challenges and global challenges in our country. Clearly, there are around 6 political formations which will not want a progressive government, which will not want stability. In our mandate, our term over the next 4 years, I'm talking about the legislative mandate and term of office, and only political force can lead this. Stability, coherence, and a progressive government. That's the Socialist Party. That's the only one that can do this. With regard to the provisional nature of all of this, I think that all the conversations we've had at high level with other groups or other countries, indeed, in this case also with the Secretary General of the United Nations and the President of the General Assembly, all of these have been very positive. They see our commitment in the Spanish government very positive. The presence of the Spanish government in the General Assembly of the United Nations is very positive. We defend a very progressive approach to many of the global challenges we have and a commitment to lay the foundations to answer many of the questions that have been rising over the last 15 months, such as climate, gender equality, recovering universal health coverage, labour protection, and so on. These are questions for the international community and for the United Nations. I think this is a huge opportunity for us and a great responsibility too for all of us on the 10th of November this year to finish this period of temporality, of temporary nature, provisional nature for the government and give the country a stable, coherent government with a progressive view to many of the challenges we have ahead of us.
Good afternoon, President. In many of your statements over the past few days, we've heard some criticism with regard to the U.S. policy, with regard to trade and climate. Have you had an opportunity to speak with President Trump at the reception he held? And if you did, could you tell us if you had any kind of exchange of views? And also on your meeting with the President of Iran, you were able to speak with the UK, with France and others who signed the communique. Just what was the outcome of that? And with regard to the exhumation of Franco, do you have a new timetable? Since you have the Supreme Court decision, how long will we have to wait? The Spanish democracy is very close to removing the remains from a very symbolic place in our country. It's very symbolic for millions of Spaniards, not just in this generation, but in previous generations, people who are unfortunately are no longer with us. So we are about to remove from a public space a monument to the Franco regime. And I think this is a victory for Spanish democracy. And therefore, my government in Spain, sooner rather than later, as soon as we can, because we will implement the decision of the Supreme Court. Now, there has been some criticism of this decision, and I find that rather strange because justice and dignity and memory do not divide us. On the contrary, all Spaniards are in agreement. I believe it's a great victory for Spanish democracy, and the government of Spain is quite pleased with the outcome. Turning to the issue of Iran, I think the government of Spain is fully aligned with the message of the main forces in the European Union. We've said that Iran needs to safeguard the nuclear agreement. Spain is expressing its will, its determination to participate in an instrument to be created by the EU to maintain trade relations with the Iranian government, with the Iranian regime. And we believe that the view on their side is the same, that they are interested in maintaining this. Microphone for the speaker, please. Apologies, the speaker cannot be heard.
Después de las elecciones del 10 de noviembre, su presencia puede facilitar un acuerdo de la izquierda, un acuerdo a tres, si piensa que sería más fácil.
Do you think it would be easier to have an agreement with the left? Goodness, to be honest, we are recreating a socialist space. On these domestic issues, I think we're continuing to pursue discussion, but Carlos asked a question. On the 10th of November, what we're going to have to do is respond to a simple question. And in Spain, we are going to move beyond the provisional phase. We've been living in it for some 5 years now. And let's move on to a phase with a stable, coherent government, a progressive approach to the problems we are facing, that we're seeing as a society and as the international community, and discuss those issues here at the United Nations. I think millions of progressive Spaniards were mobilized in the past and voted. Others voted differently, but there are leaders that are not going to guarantee stability in the country. The Socialist Party, I humbly believe that our party has the right answer that we need for these times. You just need to look at what we've done in the last few months. We have a consistent progressive government. Progressive means that other political actors recognize us because we won the elections. And it means that in Spain, Spain's good governance doesn't depend on a breakdown of the parties, independence of parties. We know how to respond to the issues. Today, if we do not have a progressive government, it's because various political players did not agree to what happened on the 28th of April and have tried to block the results. We want a stable government in Spain. The conservative forces, progressive forces, we've been given the go-ahead to shoulder this responsibility. If we don't have a consistent, coherent government, it's because, as we said after the elections on the 28th of April, clearly we did not have a consistent or coherent government. And the election and the question that is coming up on the 10th of November, which will bring all Spaniards together, is quite a simple question, and that is, do we want a stable, coherent government with a progressive response to the problems facing the country?
Sí, buenas tardes, presidente. Le voy a preguntar.
Good afternoon, President. So the CDRs and the arrests that have happened this week, I wanted to know whether the government has any information. Do you think that the beginnings of a violent process have been cancelled out now and possible terrorist acts because of this? And then the Generalitat today in the government defended those who've been arrested and said that you shouldn't link independentism with terrorism. Unfortunately, the speaker has lost the microphone. No microphone for the speaker.
Bueno, vamos a ver. Yo creo que el señor...
Well, as I see it, this is relatively simple. If you don't want fighters for independence, or we don't want independence to be related to any kind of violent action, then what has to happen is that such violent action is denounced, criticised and rejected. Any potential use of violence by any group linked to independence, if they do not wish to be associated with terrorism. I think the answer to it is fairly simple. The problem I have heard when listening to Mr. Torra, the President of the Generalitat, is that it seems to find it difficult to understand how a social democratic state works. The state is based on democracy, and in this, therefore, it acts upon the order of judges and judicial police. The judges are not dependent upon the government of Spain. We have the legislative power, the executive power, and the judicial power, which is autonomous, independent. We are a democracy, a social democratic rule of law state. So, Mr. Torre has a simple answer here. If any link to terrorism is not to be drawn, he must condemn any possible kind of violent action by groups linked to independence. That's a simple answer. Question inaudible.
Y eso que yo utilizo micrófono habitualmente. Buenas tardes, Presidente.
Good afternoon, President. I will use the microphone. So, on this last question, do you fear any violent escalation in Catalonia when the ruling is known? And going back to Errejón, you are unlinking the Socialist Party from this recomposition of a space which was previously occupied by Unidas and Podemos. So is the Socialist Party looking elsewhere and to the right? Does that mean? Well, I think that this is a false premise. Votes are not from political parties, they're from citizens. It's the citizens who vote. So we're talking about votes of Ciudadanos, votes of Podemos, votes of the PP, votes for the Socialist Party. No, it's not votes by the parties, it's votes by the citizens that we have to remember. This is what it is. The Socialist Party is where it's always been. What do we represent? Well, we represent a constitutionalist, left-wing, moderate, reformist, positive, constructive left-wing. A left which wishes to provide a response with progressive convictions to the problems of our society. So we're not looking to one side or to the other. We simply wish to see a space which is currently the majority in Spain, which is social democracy, democratic socialism. So I think that above and beyond looking at political analysts tend to talk about, we need to rather look at what citizens are going to vote for rather than political parties. We must have trust in them. We're going to explain our political project to them. We will present our electoral programme. As you know, as we've already said, this will incorporate the 370 measures which we drew up with civil society during the dialogue we held in August. We will also incorporate the proposal to create a committee representing the third sector of civil society, civil society, to evaluate the level of compliance with our electoral programme if the Spanish people decide to trust in us to govern their country from the 10th of November onwards. So I stress that this is quite simple, really. We want to abandon this temporal, provisional nature if we want Spain to be stable, coherent, and able to provide a progressive response to many of the problems we have as a country.
Insisto, yo creo que...
Well, I stress once again.
Yo lo único... Estoy terminando...
Will you please allow the Prime Minister to answer?
Perdón, ¿dónde estás? Disculpa, no, simplemente...
I apologize. I just wanted to come back to what I said at the beginning. Being independent is not easy. Mr. Torre is the leader of Catalan. There's no link between independentism and any radical violent action. What we need to do then is to condemn any assumption that these types of actions might be carried out with any through any link to their government. Thank you very much.